This is Bumping Into, where we have interesting conversations with people from all walks of life.
Welcome everybody to Bumping Into. I am Francis Populin, and on this episode of the show, we explore the world of AFL and the human mental experience behind the game. I'm joined by Damian Murdoch, who brings a unique perspective to the sport as a mindset coach who helps players overcome anxiety and mental barriers to achieve their best performance on and off the field. With years of experience working with elite athletes and beyond, Damian has become an expert in understanding the mindset and emotions that underpin success in sports and in life. Join us as we dive into the topic of anxiety, not only in sport, but also in life, and how to build resilience and mental toughness to thrive under pressure. Damian, how you going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. So what I thought we'd do is we'll start on, if we can, probably about how you got into this field of work. I mean, I discovered you through the AFL Mind Coach. So I follow that page, being an AFL fan and being interested in a lot of other sub things. You know, that's a page that I always check and look at. So that was where I discovered you. But there's obviously a back end to how you came into this field. So I'd like to find out that story.
Yeah, okay. I basically got into the field because my mindset was so poor, basically. So I've been specialising in anxiety since about 2015, and that's because that's the problem I had to overcome. I had a pretty stressful business back in Victoria, and one thing led to another, and I ended up, I had a bit of a meltdown and ended up with major anxiety problem. I was getting panic attacks all the time. Do you know much about panic attacks?
I know a little bit, and it's interesting because I've actually spoken to musicians, and you'd be so surprised how many of them struggle with this. But yet, stick them up on a stage, there's no problem. You take them off that environment, pluck them into a shopping centre, and it can turn on them. And it's so strange. You wouldn't expect that high output, high confidence person that you see, 3 foot above, to have those issues.
Yeah, that's their comfort zone on stage. So that's where they're most comfortable. Yeah.
And it's interesting.
That quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I was surprised, and I have also spoken to a guy or a couple of people, and they've said that it can almost become like a weak link. If you've broken your wrist once before, you'll always have a sore wrist, and it'll come and play up when it's cold, or if you've strained it. And I've heard people say that if you have anxiety, it's almost like that develops as a weak link that can go on you at any time.
Yeah, I would challenge that. I think it can be healed. So that's the journey I had to go on. Basically, I was getting panic attacks every day, and for people who don't know what a panic attack feels like, the closest thing that I could relate it to is put your head underwater for 45 seconds or whatever, and you'll go into a panic, and that's what it feels like.
Super urgency, life and death.
Yeah, it's just like this voice just starts screaming at you. Your heart's beating out of your chest. You just go into this feeling of panic, and I was getting that. There's a story from Tom Boyd, who, do you know him? He was the number 1 draft pick at the GWS Giants.
Oh, okay.
And he got transferred down, got traded down to Bulldogs on a massive contract, but he retired by the age of 23 because of anxiety. And he talks about it like he started getting anxious the day of games, then he couldn't sleep the night before a game, then he was getting anxious before training sessions, then he couldn't sleep before training sessions, and his comfort zone just closed in. So more and more was triggering his anxiety, and that's what happened to me, basically. It started off like a major fear of public speaking, and then it became any more than 6 people, and then it became I was starting to get these panic attacks ordering lunch, and then it became leaving the house, and it was it's pretty torturous thing to go through. So that was my history. I had to come back from that, basically. So I was seeing psychologists for years and talking about it, and I was sort of expecting them to fix it for me, but that wasn't happening. And I realized that I had to sort it out myself. And so, I went to uni, and then I just did a heap of different things that were outside the square, but just to learn about my nervous system basically and how it operates. I did a course where they teach you how to jump out of a plane without any adrenaline response. So that was really important for me. Free diving was really important for me, because with free diving, you're down under the ocean, underwater without any tank. And you get that, like we were talking before, you get that at about 45 seconds, that self-talk starts, and, your body goes into, everything changes. Your body goes into this panic, but you've got to control the mind, and then the body releases oxygen. We've got a mammalian reflex, we're mammals like seals and whales and so on. And when you're underwater, if you can just remain calm, your body releases oxygen from the liver and the spleen, and you can stay down for
buys you more time.
Buys you more time, buys you minutes. We're no different. Whales can do it 3 hours. I think seals are like 20 minutes, dolphins 10. And it's amazing. Free diving, you walk in there in the morning and you think you can't stay under 45 seconds, and you walk out later that afternoon and you've done 4 minutes. It's quite incredible. So that was really important to me, because it taught me about that self-talk, that panic, because that's what's going on when when you're lining up for goal, or whatever's happening, whatever's causing you anxiety, whether it's public speaking or lining up for goal, or those pre-game nerves. That's that self-talk that starts. You're catastrophizing all the things that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
And with free diving, you sort of learn that, no, I'm in control of this. You sort of realize that that's that voice that just starts, but you're actually the one that can actually just go, no, I'm not buying into that. I'm just going to stay calm. And then the mammalian reflex happens, and you feel like you can live underwater. It's quite incredible.
See, that's interesting, because it's been you've actually seen something that's proven to yourself that it works. It's very easy for someone to say, oh, you should just think positive, or just don't listen to them. And it's like, yeah, I get the idea is great, but when you've actually found something that you're like, well, I will show you, if you do this and we do it properly, this is what can happen. And all of a sudden it opens up a whole level of self-belief and assurance.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just a model for everything else. So, you realize that you actually are in control of the voice, and you actually can, calm yourself. And then you take that to the rest of life. So, and there's a thing too, when you're underwater, and if you freak out, you possibly die. So you listen, you know what I mean? You take it on board and you put it into practice, that's really important.
And I suppose, is there particular things that make it worse? Is it a person that's an overthinker, or very analytical, or if you own your own business, I mean, everything sits on your shoulders. At 5 o'clock, you just don't say to the boss, mate, I'm done. It's your problem. I'll be back tomorrow. Take it or leave it. When it's all on your shoulders, is it a thing that you can say, oh, well, typically it is people that care about what they do or how they're perceived, or overthink things?
Yeah, I would, like what you're talking about there, I think is, like, I would call that overwhelm, in the workplace.
Yeah.
So overwhelm's when you're, you've just got too many things swirling around in your head. And so then it's a matter of, I look at, when I was trying to heal myself, I always looked at people that were handling great pressure, because at the time I couldn't even order lunch without, having these panic attacks. So I started to look at people that were on the MCG, had to kick a pressure goal in front of 100,000 people, other people who, risk their life every day, like US Navy SEALs, for example.
Yeah.
Combat, and I love what Jocko Willink says. He wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, and he talks about how overwhelming it can be, at war on the battlefield. And so, he explains how many different things are going on at once, and it's sort of, that's comparable to a business, when you're overwhelmed in business.
Yeah.
He said all you can do is prioritize and execute, so that's the mantra that they use, in US Navy SEALs. So you can only do what you can do, but it's just a matter of, instead of all the different things, because it's crazy how much people have going on in their day. Like it never still amazes me what some people have to deal with. But if you take it out of your head and just prioritize it, write a list, do whatever you can do, and then just execute one thing after another. And again, that's just your focus, what you're focused on. So that's what I would call overwhelm in that business sense. With anxiety, anxiety is by definition, it's taking your mind out into the future and imagining bad things happening, right? So that's what the sort of the structure of anxiety. Now, what happens with you're asking sort of when it happens. Anxiety starts basically when a belief that you have wired in your body gets triggered. So say, for example, Jack Riewoldt talks about he can tell within 2 seconds whether someone's going to kick a goal when, they get paid a free kick and it's a pressure kick. He can tell within 2 seconds whether they're going to kick it.
By reading the body language. Yeah,
because a belief's been triggered there, right? Yep. So they've either got a belief that they're born for that moment, and Jonathan Brown was a huge one for that. He just had this self-belief in that situation. He's probably the best I've seen at that. So he had this self-belief that, I was born for this, and he'd go back and kick it. Right, Jamie Elliott, you saw against Essendon last year, when he got that, he didn't even look to pass it off. He had to kick a goal to win the game from 50 metres, and he just owned it because he believes that, that's the belief that got triggered, that I'm the best in this situation. Yeah. For most of us, you get a kick even 30 metres out straight in front. Darcy McPherson had one for the Suns on the weekend to win the game. And for a lot of us, it's a belief that we have that we're no good under pressure, or in under 13s, like you might have missed one and a coach said something or a parent said something, and you've made that decision now that
that's glue, that sticks. Yeah,
it sticks. Yeah, and so when you're in that situation, your body hasn't got time for you to process that and think it through. Your body's got to react to what it perceives as a danger now. That's your body, your nervous system sees that as something to be avoided, so it reacts with chemicals to put you into a panic state. It's that fight or flight freeze state, right? Yeah. So that's anxiety. That's the first part, right? So if you're getting anxiety around kicking for goal, what are your beliefs around your ability to kick the goal, right? What are your beliefs around the way that you're going to be judged by other people, etc.? If your beliefs are something around work, if you're getting anxious at work, what are your beliefs in that situation? What's actually getting triggered? Public speaking is a big one for most people, and that was huge for me. And it was like, what's your beliefs about yourself or the situation, the way you're going to get judged? Was it something that happened in school where people laughed at you in class? What was it? What's caused that to be programmed into your body now as a danger, something to be avoided?
And that's not going to be an easy thing to fix, and especially because of those programming can take place probably in preteen or definitely through in the teens. Yeah. And then, next thing you know, you're 30 and 40 and you're sort of at the back of the room not wanting to get involved.
Yeah. So as in those years, from 14 to 30 or whatever it is, you've found more evidence to support your belief too, because you've already got that. You put into situations, you might muck them up as well, and then you're just like, I see, I'm not a public speaker, I'm never doing that again, and that's what happened with me basically. So it's it gets tricky. The first thing that I do with people, and this is sport or public speaking, whatever it is I teach them about their nervous system, so they're actually aware of what's going on in that moment, because it's really confusing. You watch YouTube clips or whatever, and they just tell you to breathe, and you're just like, okay, breathe. But then, when the time comes, it's like you don't even remember to do it, and then it doesn't work, and so you just throw that one out. And that's what a lot of people say. It's like, just don't tell me to breathe. I'm sick of hearing it. So it's like with breathing, it is a big part of taking control of your nervous system. It's it's a piece of the puzzle, I believe. Whereas a lot of people are presenting it as the answer. What I would say is that if your self-talk and your focus is on everything that's going to go wrong, breathing will switch you over to the rest and digest from that fight or flight that we're talking about.
Okay.
But, it switches you back to rest and digest. But then if your self-talk and your focus is on everything going wrong again, it's going to just switch straight back. So you're not even, you see, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's like you've got to put it together with a few different things. So the first thing I do is teach people about that, about the nervous system. You know, what your nervous system is getting triggered, it's switching on, right? That's your fight or flight response. That's a system to stress. We've also got systems to de-stress, right? So we've got those wired into our body as well. Breathing is one of those. And so I teach people about that, teach people about their self-talk, about their focus, you know, how to take control of your emotional state when you're actually in that emotional state or feeling yourself working up towards it. You know, when that happens, you know, leading into a football game or a speech or whatever it might be, job interview, teach people how to take charge of that emotional state.
Yeah.
Teach people how to interpret different situations as they're going through their day, because again, your body's responding to that with chemicals, you know, that self-talk when you're putting meaning on the different situations that you encounter during your day.
Yeah.
Eventually, ultimately, you got to get to what is that belief that's getting triggered in the first place and change that. And once you get to that stage, everything changes. Yeah. And
that's not a quick, easy road, is it, to get to there?
It took me a long time, but it can be a lot quicker than that. So it's like the first thing is to identify what the beliefs are, and then, you know, decide whether you want to change them or not. And then, you know, I use NLP and hypnosis to actually make that change in the nervous system. And then it's a matter of getting out. It's like an AFL player, you know, you can teach them how to play, but it's not until they get onto the MCG that they know they know whether they're going to handle that situation. So then you put yourself, get outside the comfort zone, and that takes a bit of courage to actually put yourself, you know, with speaking, for example, public speaking, you've got to actually go and put yourself in that situation, and that's a gutsy thing to do.
Yeah.
So once you've done that, Toastmasters is a really good organisation. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of that.
Yeah. So what they do is the first time you go there, you just speak for 10 seconds. Then the next week it's 20 seconds. Then it's 2 minutes. Then it's 4 minutes. So they're just putting you outside your comfort zone, but then you realize, okay, I'll do that. I can do that, right? And then you do the next one, and your comfort zone's just getting a little bit bigger.
Yeah. Okay.
As that's happening, your nervous system is realizing that it's not a danger anymore, right? It doesn't need to respond in that way. So it's a matter of, you know, just keeping on showing that courage to put yourself in the situation. So, and
do you find, for example, like super confident players? I know if you listen to Tim Watson and Gary Lyon, Tim's always giving him banter about how overly confident Gary was as a player. Do those people that have just an inherent born belief of themselves? I even remember once Paul Keating spoke about confidence and how he could go into combat with anyone, and it was water off a duck's back. It didn't matter what dagger you threw at him. It didn't rattle him. And he brought it back to, he said, I think it was because growing up every day, he had his mum or his grandmother just telling him how good he was, that he was special, that he was going to be something. And John Mellencamp was the same. He said there wasn't a day that didn't go by for the first 30 years of my life that I didn't have my grandma telling me that I was special. And eventually you just believe it. When you have those overconfident people that seem bulletproof, is there then something that's behind the scenes, off camera, off stage, that does show up, or are they just bulletproof across the board?
I think it varies. I mean, some people are really confident in one area of their life, and I think you talked about that earlier on, really. Like, you can be super confident on stage, but then really, like, in intimate situations or, you know, putting yourself in situations off stage, you haven't got that confidence.
Yeah.
You know, so it's belief systems can be dependent, you know, on different areas of life. And then some people have just got really solid belief systems. And Kurt Fearnley, have you ever heard Kurt Fearnley, the Paralympian?
Yep.
Marathoner? His book is just incredible. The it's called Pushing the Limits, and it basically goes through his whole upbringing, where he grew up in country New South Wales, and it was like a community effort. It wasn't just his family, it was the whole community. It just instilled this belief in him that he could do anything. They didn't treat him like a disabled person. He couldn't walk, so he'd be crawling around the hills and so on. But he just got brought up with this belief that I can do anything. And so his belief systems are really solid in all areas of his life. I think with other people, their belief systems have come from just being really good at that particular sport or whatever it might be. And so they're super confident with that. So, the elite coaches always talk about you build belief through evidence, and that's from just doing it time and time again.
Yeah.
And that's where, you can do that on stage. You can be, on the MCG and 100,000 people, and you hear about people like that, but then they go home and they've got depression or anxiety in other situations. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
It can be dependent.
When you talk about things that can basically rattle your cage, like missing a goal, what happens then when you have a whole collective, like a whole team that is just down, and week after week it's this just bloodbath of scoring against them? How do you work with that as a coach? How do you then turn around and say, well, it's not just John or Fred that's got doubt because he missed 2 kicks last week. It's the collective of us. We're not performing. I mean, that must be a massive task then to try and lift. And even though the results aren't on the scoreboard, you've just got to go back out and keep going and going. Like Churchill says, when you're going through hell, you keep going.
Keep going, yeah.
But that's got to be a lot harder to do than it is to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's with that, it basically becomes about going, little wins, really. Because with testosterone and, the chemicals in your body, any emotional state is just a bunch of chemicals, right? So it helps, I think, for people to understand what causes the release of those chemicals, right? And so with when you're getting beaten and the head goes down and so on, testosterone, which gives you that powerful feeling, it goes down, right? But when you have a little win, it lifts again, right? So, and then you're just sort of aiming for little wins. Alistair Clarkson talks about that all the time, like just little wins, right? So you're looking for those. But I believe it really helps for guys to actually understand their nervous system in that situation. Like, understanding that, like what I said, it's like, your head's down, you're feeling crap, but that's just a bunch of chemicals, right? So how do we change the chemicals that are getting released in the body? And you can do that. You can take charge of that consciously, right? So and that self-talk is really important. So, when you see, a team might come out and they've built up for a game and they hang in there for a quarter and a half or 2.5 quarters. And then the other team gets on top and everyone drops their heads. And you can see it across the oval. They're walking back to the center and they've all got their heads down. And it's just what's that dialogue going through all those heads? You can almost guess it. You can almost read it just right. So it's learning that that's even going on, right? A lot of people, like I didn't know till my late 30s that self-talk was even a thing. I didn't realize I was having this conversation with myself, that telling myself. But it's such a huge determining factor on your results, really. And if you get a whole team with their head down, caught up in that narrative, it just spreads and the game gets away really quickly. So it's a matter of someone taking charge of that and turning it around. Learning how to take charge of your emotional state. And you can do that with using your body language. You can use that with your self-talk and also what you're focused on. And that's where all the elite coaches talk about forgetting the scoreboard and just focusing on the next couple of minutes. What can we do right now to kick the next goal, and whatever that is in life, whatever the equivalent is?
Yeah.
What can we do right now? Who do we need to be? What characteristics, qualities do we need to show right now? And just focus on that rather than being letting the scoreboard determine your state. That's all the coaches talk about that. But everyone thinks they're talking cliches, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was going to be one of the things I was going to ask you is, because a lot of that comes into philosophies like Stoicism,
Absolutely,
you know, and even a lot of stuff Bruce Lee used to talk about, where it's that remaining calm, be like water, and you know what you're in control of, you control, and don't worry about what you're not. And it's amazing how that those things can be applied over and over and over to so many things, from being on a sport field to being in business to being just personal self-talk.
Absolutely. And that's what I realised with the, you know, you talked about the page I do on Instagram with AFL coaches. I realised, you know, as I was trying to get better and try to find answers for myself, I started watching, I found out what I heard what Paul Roos was doing at Sydney. And so, you know, with the, you know, visualization and meditation and all the mindset stuff, you know, that made up that Bloods culture. And I was really interested in that. So I started watching his press conferences, and then I started watching a few other coaches. And what I realized is that they're saying the same things as the Stoics are saying, and what spiritual gurus are saying. They're just saying it in a different way. So it's all the same stuff over the centuries, you know, and that's a huge one of those is focusing on what you can control, bringing it back to that. Because what we tend to do is, like, you look at the scoreboard, you start to think about all the things that you've done wrong and, you know, in the course of the game, and you start to think about what's going to happen later on when you lose. You got to start to think about whether you're going to get dropped next week, and you're taking your mind off what actually is going to get the scoreboard back in your favor. And that's, you know, and so it all comes back to, what am I in control of here? You know, forget the results. They all talk about that, like Craig McRae at Collingwood, you know, and all those Brisbane guys. I mean, there's 4 coaches in the top 9, I'd say, that played under Lee Matthews, and they all say the same thing. Like, Lee Matthews didn't once talk about outcomes, like winning, the whole time he coached Brisbane. It was all about the behaviours, what actually creates the outcomes, and the focus is 100% there. And, you know, all the good coaches are talking like that now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, the change in Collingwood has been massive. I mean, even people that don't like Collingwood are starting to want them to win, or at least not being too upset about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Collingwood fan, so
so you understand.
Yeah, it's been quite bizarre because, like, I've felt that hate over the years, and we love it. But you get, like, some of my best mates are ringing and saying that they actually like watching us and like us now. But it's, there's a lot to that, I think, that hasn't been written. Yeah, the McRae's philosophies are just they're getting results on the field. But I also believe that if we all took those philosophies to life, that we'd all be a lot better. You know, because they all talk about how happy the Collingwood players are,
and they remind me of the Richmond players. When they had that big run, they just looked happy and content and calm, and it's got that same feel about it, where it's not about the pressure, it's just about enjoying the moment.
And that's what McRae does. He takes that pressure off, right? So he talks about being in discovery mode. He's got this quote, he talks about discovery mode, where they don't know, you know, that takes away all expectations. They don't know where the ceiling is. They're just trying to improve. You know, talks about growth mindset, just constant improvement, improving every day. And he actually encourages them to make mistakes. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, Well,
so it's just this
trying things without beating yourself up over it.
Absolutely, yeah. Just, he said, we just want to be a team that has a go, right?
Yeah.
So that's that discovery mode. The opposite to that is what I call protection mode, right? So if you're living in fear of making mistakes, for example, you're going to, any situations like, say, a kick for goal, you know, a set shot for goal from 30 metres out or whatever it might be, that's going to trigger things in your nervous system, which the nervous system will then respond to that as a danger, like I was talking about before. So it's going to trigger systems to protect you, that fight, flight, right? When that happens, you know, cortisol gets in the muscles tighten up. And that's what, you know, commentators, when you hear, oh, he's tightened up, you know.
Yeah, okay, so that's about that.
And it's what we call choking. That's when you're in your head worried about the result. Your mind's gone out into the future, thinking about what might happen, the result of this.
Yeah.
And that creates that response in your body, your muscles tighten up. Now you can't execute the skills, right? So what McRae has done is totally the opposite of that. He has them playing with total adventure, right? And so they even walk out on the ground. Have you seen them walk out? They walk out, smiling, laughing, all that sort of thing. They're just playing with excitement rather than fear. And it's just it's a great analogy for life, I think. If we all approach life like that, with that discovery mode, just like forgot about the expectations on us, just see what's possible, just have a go. Get outside your comfort zone. And
it must be hard, I would think, from a coach's point of view, if we use Richmond as an example, because at the moment they're under pressure. And the coach is going to, no matter his philosophy on what he wants the players to do, he's probably going to have some pressure from above that's going to be saying, well, what's going on? Or even the Suns, there's going to be people saying, come on, what is going on here? And must be that very difficult for them to be like, well, I'll deal with that. And I'll make sure that all of them don't know what I'm dealing with, because that can't impact the message I'm putting forward. So even as a coach's point of view, themselves would have to be very, very mentally sharp and strong and dynamic to deal with one set of rays coming at you, but project it differently when it, comes off.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, they always refer to it as outside noise, and they're not in control of that. Right. So if you buy into that, like it's what they talk about being on the emotional roller coaster. That's what you're just going to ride that with the media and so on. So you're not in control of that. So again, it's coming back to what are we in control of here? And so all they can do really is look at what they did on the weekend. They have that 3-step review process. It's like, what did we do well? What can we improve? And then what can we put into action to improve, right? And then they do that in a designated time. It's their first session back after the game. Yeah. And then once that's done, they don't dwell there. You know how a lot of us in society, with depression and so on, we're all dwelling in the past, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So they don't dwell there. They just get it done, see what they can improve, and they move on. They don't think about it. Then they focus forward on what they're in control of, which is preparing for the next week, right? So again, that's a model that we can all use in life, and that's why I started that coach quote page, is because it's like they're using principles and philosophies, in football clubs, and they're getting judged on them every week. So they can't afford to be talking crap. They just don't get away from it. There's too many millions of us that are hanging on every word type thing. You know what I mean? So they use models and philosophies that work, and we can put those into our own life, really, and it's going to help all of us. Because with depression, it's a lot of that is dwelling in the past, regrets, mistakes that you've made, things that you wish had gone different, right? Yeah. So if you're going to do that, make sure it's in a designated time frame, and then take a lesson from it, and then forget about it and just focus on what you're in control of going forward.
I very much like the way that you've said about basically you've got to understand the body's mechanics as to why things are happening. Because I often find that if you were to show someone how an engine in a car works, they're going to be far more likely to let it warm up before they turn the key and take off, because they've now developed an understanding of what is occurring and the metal on metal contact, and when it gets hot and when it's being pushed and how fast things are moving. And it would, potentially completely change how someone drives or the level of respect they give that car once they understand the engineering behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great example, because my mates will laugh at this, but I'm famous for not knowing anything about cars. So I open the bonnet and I look at it and I just go, I've just got no idea what's going on. Whereas, like you said, the mechanic knows that this leads to that and then that leads to that, right? Yeah. So that's what I basically do with when I teach the nervous system. It's just like this happens, then that happens, then that happens, and I turn it into a system, because that's what it is. It's like a chain of events that happens in the body that puts you into an emotional state, and then we act from that emotional state and we get our results, right? So when you understand that chain of events, like your analogy of the car, then you can actually fix it. It gives you that power yourself, so you're not just going along to doctors or psychologists or whoever it might be and hoping that they're going to fix you. You can actually take charge of it yourself. That's what I realized that I had to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's something people should do, because when you have a problem or you're looking for a solution, you should leave no stone unturned. Don't take one bit of advice. Don't take one set of tools. take pleasure in, I'm going to keep digging until I hit what I want to find underground.
Yeah, and that's what it comes back to, that discovery mode that I was telling you about with Craig McRae. It's just that mindset of discovery. Like, it's just like, what's creating this? Why am I feeling like this? Because I think a lot of us, and like my clients even tell me, they were going along to psychologist office, for example, and they're paying this money and they just expect that person to fix it. It doesn't work like that. It's like we've all been to doctors and so on. You go in there and then you're out and they're on to the next person. You know what I mean? It's just, you've got to take control of it yourself. And that's what I realized.
Yeah, 100%.
A bit too late, and so it just got curious, basically.
And have you had any experience, or is there anything that you talk about in terms of nutrition? Is there, we know a lot about gut health now. We know that about the bacteria. We know about that, like the microbiomes, and even mitochondria health in the cell, and it's all impacted by nutrition and foods definitely to avoid. But is that something as well that when you got a person on board that you're saying to them, look, I want you to follow X diet or take these bits of your food, your diet away from you because they're going to be hindering where we're trying to get to?
Okay, so when I moved to Queensland from Victoria, I went to uni and I did 2.5 years of nutrition. I did a Bachelor of Health Science, Nutrition, Naturopathy. So I actually learned. So I feel like I've got a fairly good understanding of it, but I didn't finish that degree. Like, I know quite a bit about nutrition, but as far as I don't feel like an expert in that, because I went down, once I discovered more about the mindset path, I went down that path instead of the nutrition. So what I do with people is put them onto particular podcasts and books and that sort of thing where they can find that information. And with that, there's a podcast, Huberman Lab podcast. It's a neuroscience professor from Stanford University in San Francisco. And he does a podcast that's getting quite massive now. And one of his podcast episodes deals with the nutrients, the supplements to take for anxiety. Yeah.
Right.
So, for example, magnesiums can be quite important. GABA is another one. And then he talks about some others as well. So I put people onto him, for example, and then like discuss it with them. But I don't claim to be an expert in that side of things, really.
If it's a sports person, or if it's any person, an office worker, a business owner, even a parent, whoever it is, the first step then to overcoming or dealing with this, they would make contact with yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'd love to hear from anyone, basically. And I think a really good first step, I've got a webinar on the 22nd of May where I'll explain, the basics of the nervous system, why you get into the emotional states you do. And then I'll introduce some skills to actually take charge of that emotional state. Right. And then talk a bit about beliefs as well, what's getting triggered there in the first place. So I'll actually give you some tools that are going to help. It's basically, this one's aimed at AFL footballers. So, I do different programs for anxiety and emotional states. This one's actually aimed directly at footballers. So things like, if you're getting nervous before games, if you're struggling with your goal kicking, like a lot of people are, there's one guy, for example, I was talking to recently, he's kicked about 1,000 goals. Like, he's a full forward that's kicked a lot of goals, but he says, I'm not a good set shot at goal. Like the easy ones, he'd rather kick from 50 metres than 25 metres out straight in front.
Wow.
He's like, go to jail. Yeah, it's quite incredible, but it's clearly a mindset thing that's tripping him up. But it's a lot of people. And if you look at even at AFL level, the amount of guys that just miss basic basic goals. They're good kicks of the footy, but put them in front of the sticks and it's completely different. So I'll explain to people why that's happening, why you're tensing up or your legs go to jelly or whatever it might be. So it's just, that's an emotional state.
And I think too, it would be beneficial for the younger clubs as well. I mean, my son plays in under 13s. And I saw a game on the weekend when I was watching them play, and the difference between kids that look for an opportunity and the ones that make an opportunity. And a lot of it is confidence and self-belief and the fear of doing something wrong. You can see the way they go in, and there's other kids that just railroad in. They don't care who's in the way. I want that ball. Mistake or success, I'm going after it with the same force. And other kids will pull back and they're on the outskirts and they're half present. And my advice to anyone would be start young, sort anything out now, create the bulletproof armored vest now so you can take that. Don't wait to be 30 and 40 and go, oh, I wish I had tried harder or realized this. I think, parents and clubs should be offering these sort of programs and saying, look, if you've got an issue with confidence, with anxiety or self-worth or whatever it may be, here's this. Just like they would recommend a nutritionist or anything else. I think it's an important part of building a skill set early. Would you agree that would be beneficial to the young age of, the teenage?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's when a lot of, the things we were talking about earlier, where you're making decisions, you're interpreting things, putting meaning on things that happen through the course of your day. A teacher says something, a coach says something, a parent says something, an uncle, right? And you'll go, oh, that means that I'm this.
Yeah.
Right? You're making those decisions, and then that is now a belief that you carry
definitely
to the future, and that's what gets triggered.
And especially at school. Schooling
absolutely.
is huge. I mean, if you grow up thinking you're a mediocre student, you'll very rarely become more than that, even if you do have the skill set.
Yep, and that carries across everything. Yeah, so it's about what are those meanings that your teenagers are putting on things, through the course of the day as it's happening, because it's a very confusing time. That's what happened to me. I was a confident kid up to the age of 14, and there was just some things happen that I didn't interpret very well, and it created this, lack of confidence and anxiety, and it sort of just got worse and worse, and it got to the point where it turned into a major problem. So learning it at teenage years is huge, and the amount of clients, teenagers that have become clients has just gone through the roof the last couple of years, actually.
Wow. And is there a package that is more dedicated to sporting, young sporting clubs? Is it a thing that, a local team can come to you and say, we want to offer this to our kids, be it on the projector in the clubhouse, or be it, that Johnny can log in himself and watch the videos or have a one-on-one? Is that something that you've developed up into a package for that yet?
It is. So I'm starting a program on May 29th, which is aimed at footballers, right? And that's teaching people all the things that we're talking about here, about your nervous system, how to take control of it, and then applying it, and then you come back. It goes for 8 weeks.
Right. Okay.
So that's going to be on Mondays. There's also one-on-one. So I'll take people through a program one-on-one. And I'm also doing clubs as well. So I've got a studio here, which I can do Zoom calls straight into the club rooms. So that's an option as well.
Yep.
And another option too is that even if your whole club is not interested in it, but you get a group of like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it might be from that team, and I can do up a program for
that small group, and the parents are in all coordinated. And I think that's a great idea. I think that's something, especially if the kid loves it or wants to make a career of it. I think that's a perfect idea to do that.
Yeah, and with teams, they can make like just a group. You've got a team of 22. If you can get even 3, 4, 5 people from that team, working on their mindset, turning things around, so that when you talk the things we were talking about earlier, where the opposition gets on top and everyone drops their heads. If you've got a group of 4 or 5 that are able to turn that around, they can have that situation around. That can have a huge bearing on the results going forward. Yeah, because with humans, like the most important thing for us is to fit in. Like that's it's that connection. So people will actually prioritize that safety in the group over improving, right? So they'll actually drop to the level of the team around them, or they can rise to the level of the team around them. So even if you get like 5 people from a team who lifts that bar, it brings the rest of the group along for the ride as well. So it's just it's an opportunity for that, even if it's a small group of mates or whatever it might be that they're all interested in it. Because a lot of young people, it would surprise a lot of people, I think, how interested young people are in this.
I will put a link on bumpinginto.com.au for this episode, which will have all the links to yourself and your programs. But if people are just listening, where is it that they're the best place to go to find you?
Okay, so we'll put a link in the show notes for that webinar, so you can register for that webinar on May 22nd. And then I've got on Facebook, I've got a page, Damian Murdoch Mindset Coach. And then on Instagram's the one that you found me on, the AFL Mind Coach. Right. And then my website is worldclassfriend.com. And that's basically anxiety. So, I specialize in anxiety, and the website's about that. So, but that's where a lot of people find me for football anyway, because they're actually looking at dealing with their anxiety around the game. Thanks, Francis.
Thanks, mate. I'll see you very soon.
Okay. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, everyone, for sticking to the end of the show. If you did enjoy the show, head over to bumpinginto.com.au, where you will find the episode page. Click on the link for that. It will bring up all the information about this episode, links to further information, links to Damian's social media sites and his own website, ways that you can contact him. While you're there, feel free to look at any other episodes as well. Once again, thanks for making it to the end. I appreciate your listening, and I will be working on a couple of more episodes to get them out to you as soon as I can. I'll speak to you on the next one.